Hello all. Thank you for joining me for episode number 3 of In Pursuit of Clarity. I'm titling this episode on the illusionary world of social media. So picture yourself for a moment in an alternative universe, just before a presidential election. Of the two major candidates, we'll call them John and Bill, you're leaning strongly towards John after a fair bit of research, as are most of your friends and family. As you head out to run some errands, you pass several flyers touting Bill, and several others attacking John. You walk past a couple having a conversation, and can't help but overhear a few insulting comments directed towards John. You board the subway and sit next to a group of friends having an animated discussion, who proceed to discuss Bill's policies with glowing praise. A few minutes later, you exit the subway and enter a grocery store. As you almost collide with someone coming out, they make a little political joke to ease the tension, ending with, "As long as you're not a John supporter, you're A-OK in my book." As you're paying for your groceries at the check stand, the man behind the counter makes polite conversation, but this also soon turns political, and he's soon speaking with great emotion about what he believes to be the negative effects of John's policies, ending with, "I can't believe people are stupid enough to vote for that guy." Your day proceeds like this for hours on end. Everywhere you turn, you hear anger, sadness, disgust, exasperation. Every negative emotion under the sun directed towards what had been your candidate of choice. As you walk back through that door in the evening, might you have questions rattling around in your subconscious about whether or not you might have been mistaken with your initial judgment on whom to vote for? Most people, in this instant of doubt, aren't going to recall their friends and family being in agreement with them, or those polls showing the public equally split between the two candidates, or any other logical, rational argument. Unfortunately, this isn't how we're wired. Whether we like it or not, even the most even-keeled of us will be slightly affected from such a string of events, and begin asking themselves, could I be wrong about this? What am I missing? Human beings, like all animals, are far more herd-like in thought and behavior than we'd ever be willing to admit. And if you pull back, the reasons for this make some sense. It's safer to move with the crowd. One gains social currency, socializing in general becomes easier and more fluid, and if you end up being wrong, you always have the excuse, but so was everyone else. You're never at risk of being lonely or the odd man out. You never run the risk of being seen as different or abnormal. These are extremely powerful impulses, and we're all wired to experience them to a greater or lesser degree. Those on the right of the political spectrum seem to be a bit more independent-minded and a bit less focused on social acceptance and validation. But we're all human and far from immune to any of this. I believe the above analogy increasingly represents the state of social media at present. As the online world becomes our day-to-day reality, more so with each passing day, as you navigate from social platform to social platform, this is very much like moving from the street to the subway to the grocery store, experiencing similar social inputs along the way. Now, I think we all know that all major social media and content publishing platforms, almost without exception, are controlled by individuals of a relatively singular political ideology and worldview, and that censorship and marginalization of those they disagree with is rampant. But I'd like to go further and pose a question, purely hypothetical, of course. What if some institution or political candidate or political cause mastered the art of developing lifelike androids, essentially indistinguishable from human beings, and let a small handful loose in your city to act as any other citizen would, except that they'd engage in various behaviors proven to be most efficient at shaping public opinion? What if they released hundreds of these, or even thousands? What if a significant percentage of your entire town was composed of these androids? What if these androids were connected to a central database containing your comprehensive personality profile along with hundreds of millions of others, and could make use of this information to determine how to most efficiently communicate with you to help bring about any desired outcome? What if they began to learn through trial and error how to work together in new and novel ways to bring about this hypothetical desired outcome, whatever it may be? What if it weren't just you being affected by their manipulation, but your friends and family as well, who, in turn, have an inevitable effect on you and your thought processes? What might the effects of such activity be on society and culture as a whole? I think most of us still completely fail to grasp the awe-inspiring manipulative power resulting from the collection of years of daily data inputs from almost every last man, woman, and child on the planet. A data picture which can then be used to help understand each individual in many ways better than they know themselves. And it's not the direct and readily obvious effects of such a process that should be feared, but the most subtle. Let's say, just for example, among your reasons for supporting the candidate John were his tough stance on crime, his stance on cutting aid to foreign nations, and his stated goal of strengthening the military. As you're out running errands, an android taxi driver picks you up, and amidst the casual banter back and forth, he recounts a conversation with an insider friend about rampant waste in military spending. As you step out of the cab, another android approaches, earnestly pleading for some spare change to help her charity, aimed at helping those suffering extreme poverty in Eastern Europe. And you listen patiently as she discusses how the ever-decreasing U.S. aid can only do so much to solve the problem. And then, at work, an associate tells a story about his niece and her hardships, full of genuine passion and sympathy, and at the end reveals she's had struggles with the law, and newly passed legislation has been making life excessively difficult for her. In the span of just a few hours, the three main tenets of your support for John as a political candidate have been ever so slightly undermined. Will this change your vote? Unlikely. But what about days, weeks, or months of such behavior? What if you were on the fence, or nearly so to begin with, or simply didn't care a great deal about politics in the first place? To my knowledge, we don't have convincing, walking and talking androids mixing with us freely just yet. But I've come to believe that we have their equivalents online, and they've come to completely dominate the tone and discussion on places like Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, even Wikipedia, news forums, and comment sections. Social media is the most powerful social conditioning tool ever developed. Left to its own devices and allowed to operate without meddling by those seeking to artificially tilt the playing field this way or that, the varied and wide-ranging discussion has a positive effect of informing us all where the natural boundaries lie with regards to all issues and ideas, where the extremes are, where the middle ground is, and we're able to orient ourselves accurately accordingly. But what if social media is no longer free and open discourse between all peoples, walks of life, and ideas and concepts? What if invisible forces were placing their thumb on the scale behind the scenes in ways not easily discernible? And we're learning how to do so both more effectively and more covertly over time. Most of you know about groups like ShareBlue and Correct the Record and others, some which even work for foreign governments, employing individuals to use hundreds or thousands of sock puppet accounts to alter social media discourse. But the far greater threat in the long term is technology that manipulates automatically and hones its skill through machine learning techniques over time. These creations do exist, and they'll only grow and become more proficient over time. These are so dangerous because, if well and properly made, they'd be so subtle we'd never know they existed. I've always found it interesting how integral the CIA and other intelligence agencies were in the creation of the dominant platforms we all know and use today, and how closely they work with these companies. Considering Operation Mockingbird saw the CIA infiltrate every major magazine, newspaper, and television media institution in the nation under the guise of reasons of national security or national interest, think for a moment just how quickly big tech would capitulate and give them free rein in exchange for lucrative contracts, unspoken hints at protection from antitrust action, or just through the self-justification of feeling like they were doing their patriotic duty and to avoid rocking the boat or making powerful enemies. I find it interesting that in a nation split roughly 50-50 down political lines, that hard-right conservatives seem to make up less than 1% to 2% of the blue check marks on Twitter, whereas hard-left liberals make up 50% or more. I find it interesting that in any random POTUS tweet, no matter how benign, lighthearted, friendly, or controversy-free, you're likely to see a 10 or 20 to 1 ratio of negative to positive responses. And this can range as high as 50 to 1 at times. The president could be honoring firefighters in California in a tweet, and any individual who clicks to see the replies is going to see page after page after page of the most hateful vitriol. Because no man is an island, and because we're all intimately connected and affect one another in countless direct and indirect ways, and because we're encoded with numerous traits and tendencies that push us towards herd-like thinking and behavior, the norms of prevailing culture matter very deeply. They shape and guide our future path. Whoever holds the center dominates the world. What I'm hinting at here is that social media is opening a brand new chapter, allowing for the wholesale reorientation of this center, a forcible dictating of just where this center point rests. As this center point migrates, all of us unconsciously migrate with it, as if by magic. This is why the news media has been so immensely powerful for so long. Up until very recently, they were able to determine where this center point lies, almost effortlessly, and shift it at will. After all, who's going to suspect virtually all of the press in the Western world is marching to the beat of a single drum? This same skepticism of the average onlooker applies just as cleanly to social media. The vast majority can't help but believe that, of course, social media is an objectively random collection of individuals from across the world, all giving their opinions freely, making the resulting norms and center points a fairly decent barometer of where humanity is at, and what we're thinking and feeling at any given point in time, on any given issue. What I'm asking you to consider is the possibility that not only is our online world artificially shaped via the aggressive elimination of voices on the right, coupled with the aggressive promotion of all voices singing the praises of diversity or multiculturalism or any aspect of cultural degeneracy or the globalist ethos. But far more importantly than this, several of these voices aren't even genuine human beings, and that the world being created online is almost entirely illusory. And I'd like to leave you with this question. If a critical mass were reached with regards to the number of bots and individuals paid to express certain points of view using hundreds or thousands of accounts spanning across social media, what percentage of real human beings might then be willing to consciously or unconsciously mold and shape their viewpoints accordingly, to ensure they stayed safely amidst the herd and continue to experience that addictive stream of endorphin rushes arising from likes and retweets and compliments? Might this be why the NPC meme was simultaneously one of the most powerful and disconcerting ever crafted? I hope it's clear now why I developed the social media platform and link aggregator concepts, and why I feel such solutions aren't just helpful options, but rather absolute necessities, and why I won't stop until I find the funding to create them. If we don't free ourselves from the possibility of algorithmic, machine learning-driven manipulation, a process that automatically refines and perfects itself over time, based on countless billions of data inputs, until it's so subtly efficient as to be practically undefeatable, all of humanity may soon be an animated golem, not just lacking in free will and independence of thought, but almost infinitely worse, lacking these things while presuming themselves to be acting entirely on their own volition. Thanks for listening.
This is the end, beautiful friend. This is the end, my own